It was supposed to be a celebration. An elegant evening of champagne toasts, soft music, and glowing tributes to my parents' 45 years of marriage. I spent weeks helping my mother plan every detail, because that's what daughters do. Right? We show up. We smile. We support. I wore a dress I hadn't touched since before the divorce, altered to fit the body of a woman still trying to hold herself together. My daughter, Chloe, just 15, wore the emerald gown my mother insisted she wear. "It brings out your eyes," she said. The Miller estate was buzzing with laughter and crystal clinks as guests poured into the grand ballroom in Beverly Hills. My parents stood at the entrance like royalty, greeting everyone with perfectly rehearsed charm. I stood beside them, playing my part. My son Liam was swept away to the head table, seated right between his grandfather and my ex-husband Mark. Yes, Mark was there. Invited, welcomed. Smiling with his new girlfriend like nothing had ever happened. As the evening unfolded, I kept glancing at Chloe. Something was wrong. Her eyes darted around the room. Her phone kept buzzing. She wasn't eating, wasn't smiling. And then, right as the cake was being rolled out, the guests applauding, cameras flashing, she grabbed my arm and whispered, "Mom, we have to go." "No." I blinked. "What?" "Chloe, what are you talking about?" "I'll tell you in the car. Please? Just trust me." She was shaking. Her voice was low, but sharp with fear. I looked into her eyes. My daughter, my rock. And I saw something that made my blood run cold. Desperation. And in that moment, I did something I had never done before in my family. I listened without questioning. We slipped away from the ballroom without goodbyes. As we walked to the car, hand in hand, I felt the weight of something shifting. She had seen something I hadn't. And I was about to find out just how far betrayal can go when it comes wrapped in family. If you've ever felt like you're losing your place in the very family you gave everything to, if you've ever been the one holding on while everyone else lets go, please like this video, share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the only person who can save you is the one you raised to see the truth. I grew up in a house where it was measured in accomplishments. A house where dinner conversations revolved around quarterly earnings and prestigious college admissions. Where mistakes were just corrected. They were remembered. Forever. My father, William Miller, was the architect of our image. A real estate mogul with a voice that filled every room and silenced it too. My mother, Charlotte, was his public relations department, smiling for the cameras, cutting people out of our lives with surgical precision when they didn't fit the brand. And somehow, I became part of that brand, until I wasn't. When I married Mark Daniels, my parents were elated. "He's a future leader," my father had said. What he meant was, Mark played by the rules, their rules. And for 10 years I did too. I hosted, I smiled, I kept quiet. Even when Mark started controlling what I spent, what I wore, who I saw. When I discovered his affair, the whole glossy picture cracked. But it was Chloe, then just 13, who looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, you don't have to keep pretending." So I left him. I moved out of the mansion and into a modest apartment in Santa Monica. I returned to freelancing, tried to build something of my own. I thought that would be the hardest part. But I was wrong. Because that's when my parents started calling again. Offering help, inviting me to Sunday dinners, buying Liam gifts I couldn't afford, and always praising Mark. "He's being so mature through all of this," my mother would say. "He just wants what's best for Liam." And me. I was unstable, sensitive, emotional. Still, I wanted to believe their attention meant they'd changed, that they finally saw me. But Chloe wasn't convinced. She'd watch them with narrowed eyes. "They're not helping," she'd whisper. "They're planning something." I'd dismiss her, call it teenage drama. But I knew better. I just didn't want to face it. And so, when the invitation to their 45th anniversary party arrived, embroidered, embossed, extravagant, I said yes. I told myself it was time to make peace, to move forward. Chloe didn't say a word, But the night before the party, she packed her phone charger, a notebook, and a pen. "Just in case," she said. That detail haunts me now. Because while I was still desperate to be the daughter they wanted, Chloe had already accepted the truth. They weren't protecting me. They were preparing to erase me. When Chloe and I arrived at the Beverly Hills ballroom, the golden lights glowed like something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, waiters in tuxedos gliding between tables. It was opulence at its most polished. My mother had spared no detail. She lived for nights like this. As we stepped through the grand entrance, my father gave me a nod, but scooped Liam into his arms immediately. "There's my future CEO," he joked loudly, and the nearby guests chuckled. Chloe stood quietly beside me, gripping her purse. My mother kissed my cheek. "You look comfortable," she said, eyes flicking over my altered dress. Then, to Chloe, "Darling, that dress brings out your eyes." I knew emerald was the right choice. They seated Liam at the head table between my father and my breath caught. Mark. I hadn't seen him since the divorce hearing. And here he was, in a tailored suit, arm around his new girlfriend, Kayla, who looked like she'd walked out of a lifestyle magazine. They were laughing with my parents like they'd been part of the family all along. "Did you know he was coming?" I whispered to my sister-in-law. She looked startled. "I thought you invited him. Your mom sent them a personal card." And that's when it hit me, they'd planned this. The room spun for a moment as I watched Mark hug my father like an old ally. My mother admired Kayla's necklace. No one looked at me. Not really. I was standing at my own parents' celebration, and I was invisible. As I tried to hold it together, I noticed Chloe in the corner, eyes fixed on them, phone in hand. She wasn't texting, she was recording. Later, I would ask her about that moment. But right then, I just smiled through gritted teeth, toasted glasses, shook hands, nodded graciously while people congratulated me on handling the divorce so gracefully. One cousin even whispered, I would have thrown a drink in his face. I laughed, pretended, survived. But the knife came later, during the toast. My father raised his glass. Marriage is about making tough decisions for the family's future. Sometimes that means prioritizing legacy over discomfort. He looked at Mark. Then Liam. Then me. People clapped. I felt cold. Later, while I searched for Chloe, I passed the hallway leading to the library, my father's private study. Aunt Nancy was coming out, flustered. They're talking about transferring property, she said. And your name came up, with words like unstable and unfit. Be careful, Jessica. My stomach dropped. I found Liam laughing with Mark, seated on his lap. My mother beamed at them like they were the perfect portrait. Where's Chloe? I asked. Out on the terrace. My mother replied. She's been moody. I stepped outside and found her on the phone pacing. Mom, she said when she saw me. Just watch them tonight. All of them. Especially Grandpa. Especially Mark. What's going on? I asked. I'll tell you everything, she said. But you need to stop pretending this is just a party. And in her voice, I heard the fear I'd ignored for months. The manipulation had already begun, and they were using my son to do it. I didn't want to believe it. That my parents, my own flesh and blood, were orchestrating something behind my back. But as the night wore on, the pieces started falling into place. Back inside the ballroom, the lights dimmed for a video montage titled 45 Years of Legacy. Guests applauded as old photographs filled the screen. My parents at their wedding, at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, holding my brother as a baby. There were countless images of Mark in recent years. Vacations, family holidays, him holding Liam at Christmas. There were 2 photos of me, and only one of Chloe. I sat frozen as the crowd applauded. But I could feel Chloe's eyes on me from across the room, watching how I processed the slow erasure of our place in this family. Then came the announcement. My father stepped up to the microphone, beaming. Tonight, we are not just celebrating the past. We're building the future. He gestured toward Mark and Liam. In the coming weeks, We'll be finalizing arrangements to ensure the Miller legacy continues in capable hands. The applause was hesitant, scattered. I looked around, confused, breathless. That's when Chloe squeezed my hand under the table. "I need to check something," she whispered and slipped away. For 20 minutes, I sat in rising panic, watching Liam giggle as my father paraded him around the room, introducing as the next generation. Mark stood nearby, glowing with pride, as if he hadn't shattered our lives just a year ago. When Chloe returned, she looked pale, but focused. She leaned into my ear. "Mom? We need to go. I've seen enough." "In a minute?" I whispered. "Tell me what's going on." "Not here," she said. "Not in front of them." I didn't argue. Her eyes told me everything I needed to know. I made my way toward Liam, but my mother intercepted me. "You're not leaving already, are you? The best part is coming." "Chloe's not feeling well." I lied. She tilted her head. "Send her home with a driver. You and Liam should stay." I looked past her and saw my father with his hand on Liam's shoulder, Mark beside them, smiling at a group of lawyers. Something inside me broke. My mother's tone softened to condescension. "Jessica, this is family business. You don't need to worry about it." Those words cut through the fog. I walked straight to Liam, took his hand, and turned to go. Mark stepped in our path. "Brooke, this isn't the time to be difficult. Your father wants to talk about the education fund." "Another time?" I said firmly. He lowered his voice. "We're trying to help you. Financially. Don't let pride get in the way." And then Chloe stepped between us, voice sharp and clear. "We're leaving. Now." As we pushed through the ballroom doors, I caught a snippet of conversation between my father's lawyers. "Custody adjustment should be easy once the deed's transferred. She won't see it coming." At that moment, my father caught up to us, face stern. "This is highly inappropriate," he said. "We have guests. Liam needs to stay for the announcements." I turned to him, steady for the first time that night. "Whatever this is, it can wait. We're leaving." His jaw clenched. "This is exactly the emotional instability we've been concerned about." "You mean the refusal to be manipulated?" I shot back. He leaned in. "We're protecting what's best for Liam." "No," I said. "You're protecting your empire, and sacrificing your daughter to do it." Chloe pulled on my sleeve. "Mom, now." I looked at her, my fierce, loyal girl, and without another word, we walked out of the party, out of their house of illusions, into the warm summer night. The car ride home felt like a slow descent out of a nightmare, except I wasn't waking up. Chloe sat beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Liam, in the back seat, hummed a melody from the party, completely unaware. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to scream. But I knew better. So I waited. 15 minutes later, once Liam drifted to sleep, Chloe whispered, "Pull over." I stopped in the parking lot of a dark, empty shopping center. She pulled out her phone and opened a folder labeled Documents. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said. "But I've been collecting things. For months." She showed me screenshots first, texts between her and Aunt Nancy, my estranged sister. Nancy had warned Chloe that my father might try to cut me out of the inheritance, just like he'd done to her years ago. That he'd try to do it quietly, legally, but without warning. Then came the pictures Chloe took that night in the study. Trust documents, property transfer forms, a new custody petition, all with my name replaced by Mark's. And signatures from both my parents. "It's all about Liam," she said. "They're positioning him as the future. The heir. And they're cutting us out." I scrolled through the photos, heart pounding. There it was. Black ink on cream paper, the Victorian home I'd grown up in, transferred to Mark. As guardian of Liam Daniels. They weren't just favoring him. They were replacing me with him. "He's only 7. I whispered. Chloe nodded. "But he's the acceptable one. Malleable. A boy. A Daniels." She turned on an audio recording next. My father's voice. "Jessica's too unpredictable. Liam needs stability. Mark provides that. This is about legacy, not feelings. Then Mark, with me as guardian, will ensure the estate stays intact. Jessica would sell it for some gallery project. Then my mother. Liam's already comfortable with us. He won't even miss her once the transition is done. I covered my mouth to keep from sobbing. My own parents. Plotting to take my son, hand him over to my ex-husband and erase me like I never existed. Chloe's voice trembled. They've been feeding Liam lies. Telling him he'd get to go to a special school. That living with Dad would mean a pool, his own room, trips to Europe. I stared ahead at the empty storefronts, feeling like the floor had disappeared. But why exclude you? I asked. Why not just support us both? Because you left the plan, she said simply. You stopped playing the role. And I'm too much like you. She paused, then added, it's not about love, Mom. It's about control. Those words hung in the air. Because they were true. The next morning, we sat at the kitchen table, poring over everything Chloe had gathered. She'd been watching, listening, connecting the dots I refused to see. And now it was all undeniable. I reached for her hand. You saved me? You raised me? She whispered. I just paid attention. Later that day, I made the call. To an attorney my sister Nancy recommended. One who didn't play golf with my father. One who didn't owe favors to Mark. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I wasn't alone, because while they saw Liam as a legacy and me as a liability, they never saw Chloe coming. The deeper I dove into Chloe's evidence, the clearer the picture became. They had been planning this for months, maybe even longer. My parents' anniversary wasn't just a celebration. It was a setup, a public display of legacy transfer disguised as a toast to love. And I had walked right into it wearing a second-hand dress and a hopeful smile. I remember the slideshow now with sharper clarity. How every image had purpose. My father shaking hands with Liam, Mark holding him during a ski trip I was never invited to. My parents laughing with Mark's girlfriend while I stood awkwardly on the sidelines. The story they were telling. That Jessica Miller was an outsider to her own family. And that Liam, guided by Mark and blessed by the Millers, was the true heir. Chloe noticed first. And that breaks me. While I was helping pick centerpieces, she was decoding a strategy. While I was hoping for reconciliation, she was gathering intel. And still, she protected me from it all until she had no choice but to act. After our late-night evidence review, I did what I had never dared to do before. I called my estranged sister, Nancy. We hadn't spoken in over 15 years, not since my father cut her off for marrying someone beneath the family standard. She picked up after 2 rings. I've been waiting for this, she said, and I burst into tears. For an hour, she told me everything. How our father manipulated her out of her inheritance. How he used family events to announce legal decisions that couldn't be reversed without massive, public fallout. How he rewrote the story so often. Even she started to question her memory. You were the golden child, she said. Until you started thinking for yourself. The next day, I contacted an attorney she recommended, Jennifer Reeves. She didn't wear designer heels. She didn't smile at family names. She didn't care about Beverly Hills zip codes. She cared about justice. Jennifer listened, quietly flipping through the documents and recordings Chloe had compiled. This isn't uncommon, she said. Wealthy patriarchs use estate structures as weapons. But what's rare? A 15-year-old who saw it coming. We began legal proceedings immediately. We filed motions to freeze property transfers, challenge the new trust documents, and block any custody modifications. We also started gathering witness statements. From Aunt Nancy, from the house staff, even from my brother Brian, who lived on the East Coast and had long avoided family drama. It was Brian who sent the smoking guns and email from my father to their corporate lawyer, stating, "We'll move everything under Mark's name by Q3. Jessica's emotional state is too unstable to manage family assets." They didn't just doubt me. They were building a case against me. Even more heartbreaking were the recordings of conversations between Liam and my parents. My father promising him trips, cars, a bigger bedroom, if he lived with Daddy, instead of Mommy. My mother telling him that Mommy's struggling right now, and living with Dad would make things easier for everyone. It wasn't just betrayal, it was indoctrination. Jennifer helped me file an emergency petition for family court protection. Chloe provided her testimony. We attached every document, every voice recording, every email. When Mark tried to call me, I didn't pick up. When my father emailed to discuss things like adults, I forwarded it to my lawyer. And when Liam cried, asking why Grandpa said Mommy was too tired to take care of everything, I told him the truth, in age-appropriate terms. Sometimes, I said gently, grown up say things to get what they want. Even when it hurts people they love. He nodded slowly. But I want to live with you, Mom. That night, Chloe curled up next to me on the couch. They never saw me as a threat, she said. That's why I got so close. I kissed her forehead. They underestimated the one person I taught to pay attention. By the time we walked into mediation 3 weeks later, with Jennifer at my side and Chloe's evidence laid out like a minefield, the Millers looked stunned. Mark sat pale and silent. My father's hands trembled as Jennifer listed the legal consequences for trust fraud and custodial manipulation. And my mother, she dabbed imaginary tears, still trying to play the victim. But this time, I didn't flinch. Because for once, the spotlight was on the truth, and not the performance. It's one thing to be betrayed by your ex-husband. It's another to realize your own parents are the architects of that betrayal. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the moment I watched my daughter walk into that attorney's office, sit across from 3 adults in suits, and lay out her evidence like a seasoned prosecutor. She didn't blink. She didn't stutter. Chloe read from her notes, played audio clips, and pointed to screenshots with the calm determination of someone twice her age. The attorneys and the mediator were visibly stunned. This recording, she said, tapping her screen, proves that my grandfather and Mark planned to remove my mother from the family trust by declaring her emotionally unstable. Then she turned the screen. And this one confirms they intended to present Liam as the future of the Miller estate, using him to keep the family legacy in male control. She even brought up the photo montage. They intentionally omitted my mother and me from key parts of the family narrative and featured Mark and Liam repeatedly. It wasn't an oversight. It was a message. By the time she finished, even Jennifer Reeves, the woman who had seen it all, was speechless. Later, I pulled Chloe aside. How did you stay so composed? She shrugged. I knew what I had was true. And they weren't expecting me to have a voice. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't expecting her to have a voice, just like they never expected me to have one. They had spent decades grooming us to be agreeable, polished, silent. And in one afternoon, Chloe shattered that. Over the following weeks, the tide shifted. Mark, facing pressure from his new fiancée and her family, suddenly became cooperative. His lawyers proposed settlements, rescinding the modified custody paperwork, and agreeing to a neutral trustee for Liam's inheritance. My father remained defiant, but the legal weight of Chloe's recordings made even his high-powered team nervous. Eventually, he agreed to a formal mediation. The room was cold. My parents sat on one side of the table, Jennifer and I on the other. Chloe sat at the head, flanked by folders and her tablet. My father tried to speak first. I wanted on record that this family matter should have stayed private. Jennifer raised a hand. We're here to resolve, not defend. Please let Ms. Miller proceed. Chloe looked at her grandfather, unshaken. I loved you, she said. I trusted you. And you used that trust to try to destroy my mother. You told Liam that she wasn't good enough. That she was tired, unstable, selfish. But I was there. I saw what you did. I heard what you said. You can't erase us. Silence. Not a single word from my parents. The final agreement was signed that afternoon. The family home would remain in a neutral trust, with me as the primary guardian and trustee until Liam turned 18. All prior custody modifications were nullified. My inheritance, previously reassigned, was restored in full. Both of my children would be legally guaranteed equal rights in a future distribution of family wealth. Grandparent visitation would be limited and supervised, pending evaluation. It wasn't about the money. It was about boundaries, about finally putting an end to a system where love was used as leverage. Afterward, as we walked to the car, Chloe stopped beside me. "Do you think they'll ever understand what they did?" she asked. I looked up at the sky, a strange mix of freedom and sorrow settling in my chest. "They don't have to understand," I said. "They just have to stop." She nodded. Then, almost shyly, added, "You know, I was scared. All the time. That you wouldn't believe me. That you'd choose them." I turned and looked at her, eyes stinging. "I'm sorry I ever made you doubt that." She smiled. "I didn't doubt you, Mom. I just needed you to see it for yourself." And in that moment, I realized, Chloe didn't just save me from them. She saved me from the version of myself that still thought I needed their love to matter. It's strange how power shifts. Not with shouting, not with violence, but with quiet, relentless truth. Once the agreement was signed, the facade cracked. My father no longer looked like the man who could control every room. My mother avoided my gaze, lips tight, still clinging to the belief that if she didn't acknowledge it, none of it was real. But it was real. Every word, every plan, every attempt to rewrite the narrative had been exposed. And the person who made it happen? My daughter. After the mediation, Chloe didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply went home, took off her dress shoes, and went straight to her room to finish her history homework. She had carried a burden no child should ever have to bear, and she never once asked to be praised for it. Meanwhile, I got to work rebuilding. With my inheritance restored and the trust cleared of manipulation, I bought a modest home in Santa Monica. Nothing extravagant, just ours. The gallery promoted me to full-time manager. My clients doubled. My name, once overshadowed by a family legacy I didn't own, was now on a gallery wall. Liam took more time, he had questions. Why did Grandpa say you're not good at taking care of money? Why did Dad say I'd get a better life without you? We talked. We cried. We visited a family therapist. Someone who helped Liam understand that adults sometimes make choices based on fear, not love. Chloe joined those sessions too, but mostly she sat in silence, watching Liam, translating his confusion into words even I couldn't find. She told him gently. They were trying to play a game. Mom just made sure they couldn't cheat. At school, she flourished. Straight A's. Leadership club. College brochures started arriving addressed to her name, not the Miller legacy. She even stayed in contact with Nancy, my sister. We began rebuilding too, over long phone calls, visits to her cabin in Oregon, and emails filled with childhood photos our parents had tried to erase. Mark stayed away. He didn't fight back. Kayla, his fiancée, apparently made it clear she wouldn't be marrying into a family lawsuit. And my parents, they began calling once a week. Short, stilted calls to check in. Chloe usually let them go to voicemail. Liam was allowed to speak, but never unsupervised. We kept the boundaries strong. They sent gifts. Expensive, guilt-laced gestures. We sent them back, unopened. Not out of spite. Out of principle, because it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the right to live unmanipulated. One evening, as we decorated the living room for Halloween, Chloe turned to me with a smile. "Do you think they ever loved you, Mom?" she asked. I paused, tangled in a string of lights. "I think they loved who they wanted me to be," I said. "Not who I really was." She nodded. "Then they never really had you to lose." We laughed. It was the first time in months the sound came from our bellies and not from effort. I looked around at our slightly crooked decorations. The half-finished pumpkin on the table, the playlist of 90s songs Chloe had mocked me for. And I realized, we were free. Not because we won in court, but because we finally understood what they couldn't. That family is not built on blood or name or wealth. It's built on who shows up when the room is burning. And Chloe. She walked into the fire to pull me out. The months that followed weren't easy. Just because you sever the rope doesn't mean the bruises disappear overnight. There were days I questioned myself. Nights I lay awake wondering if I'd overreacted, if I'd torn apart what was left of my family for some misunderstood documents and half-heard words. But then I'd remember the recordings. The signatures. The emails. My mother's voice, cold and calm, saying, she won't even miss him once the transition is done. No. I hadn't imagined it. What I had done was survive it. And now, I was healing. Our new home didn't smell like money or fresh orchids arranged by professionals. It smelled like lemon-scented floor cleaner, homemade spaghetti, and Chloe's lavender shampoo. Liam still struggled sometimes. He'd ask why Grandma didn't visit as often. Why Grandpa wasn't at his baseball games. Why Dad no longer took him to the big house with the big TV. I answered gently every time. Not with bitterness, but with honesty. Because people who love you don't make you choose. In family therapy, Liam once said, I thought if I lived with Grandpa, I'd be more important. That broke me. But Chloe, sitting next to him, leaned in and said, you're already important. You don't need a big house to prove it. The therapist later told me that Liam's healing was accelerated by Chloe's calm reassurance. That his sister's steady love was more powerful than any manipulation he'd been fed. Meanwhile, Chloe grew into herself even more. She started writing for her school newspaper. The first piece, When Adults Lie, The Cost of Family Loyalty. It went viral in the local community. And yes, my parents read it. They never said a word. Our structured visitation remained intact. 1 hour, supervised, every other week. Sometimes they didn't show. Sometimes they brought gifts. But what they never brought, what they couldn't bring, was the same control they once wielded like a scepter. I didn't need it anymore. My career blossomed. The gallery promoted me again, this time to regional director. I curated 2 major exhibitions, one of which featured Chloe's photography. Yes, she's inherited the eye. But more than that, she's inherited the strength. As for Mark, we stayed civil. He apologized, once. It was brief and awkward, over coffee. With the kind of shame that comes when consequences finally catch up. He sees the kids every other weekend. But now, it's on our terms. Chloe never says much to him. But I notice she always keeps her phone in plain sight when they speak. It's not fear, it's power. She knows now what so many women never get the chance to learn. She's allowed to protect herself. And me. I no longer chase the approval I once begged for. I no longer wait for phone calls that never come. I no longer measure my worth by the size of my father's checks or the tightness of my mother's hugs. I measure it by this. The way Chloe laughs freely now. The way Liam curls into me at bedtime and says, you make me feel safe. The way I can look in the mirror and say, you were right to walk away. I may have lost my family that night at the anniversary party. But I found myself. And I found the kind of love that doesn't manipulate, doesn't judge, doesn't control. The kind that says, I see you. I believe you, and I will stand with you, no matter who tries to tear you down. That love came from the 15-year-old girl who saw the fire before I ever smelled the smoke. 1 year later, I asked Chloe a question I'd never dared before. What was the moment? I said. That made you realize we had to that night. She didn't hesitate. When Grandpa called Liam the legacy, she said. And looked straight through you like you were already gone. Her words haunted me. In the best way. Because the truth is, I had been disappearing for years. Bit by bit, bending to family expectations, swallowing betrayal, trying to keep the peace while it crushed me. But Chloe saw what I couldn't. Or maybe wouldn't. And she pulled me out. There's a quote I keep on our fridge now. Sometimes the smallest voice is the one telling the biggest truth. That voice belonged to a 15-year-old girl. This story isn't about revenge. Or even justice. It's about awakening. About recognizing that control masquerading as love isn't love at all. It's about choosing to believe your children, even when it's inconvenient. Especially then. It's about building a life where respect isn't conditional, where love doesn't require compliance, where legacy means truth, not inheritance. Chloe gave me that legacy, and I will spend the rest of my life honoring it. If you've ever ignored your gut, silenced your truth, or taught your child to be quiet in the name of family harmony, please listen. Listen to the uncomfortable. Listen to the inconvenient. Listen to your child. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is believe them.